Hello, everyone. My name is Kanan Townsend, and I am the Director of Education and Public Programs at the Robert Richard Moton Museum. And this is another edition of our Moton Interview series. Today, we have our guest, Ms. Antoinette Waters, and I'm going to let her introduce herself and say her name and her title for us.
My name is Antoinette Dempsey Waters. I am an educator in Arlington, Virginia. I went to Temple University for undergrad, and I went to George Mason University for graduate school. I am currently the Mount Vernon History Teacher of the Year. I have been featured on a number of different periodicals or publications, such as Huffington Post, the Washington Post, as well as a few other various smaller papers, such as the Richmond Times.
Yeah, I'm glad I didn't take an attempt at that, because you said some stuff I didn't even know about. That is all. That is all awesome. We had the chance to connect probably a year ago. I made a trip up to Northern Virginia to visit one of her classes, and I was, Lord, her African American history course is incredible. I just had a chance to look at her bookshelf and just see all the great literature and such she had. And she actually, and I don't have any problem sharing this, but she corrected me on one of my points in my PowerPoint. I was like, ooh, this is the real deal. I always have to come correct. So I was appreciative of that, but thankful for you spending your time here talking to us for a little bit today. So getting started a little bit. So you mentioned you went to Temple, went to George Mason for your master's. How long have you been in education?
So this is going to be my 17th year. I'll be completing my 17th year teaching this year. It's been a long time.
Yeah. All that's been high school?
Yes, it's all been high school. I have taught a myriad of courses, and I always say that teaching those courses, as well as the courses that I took in undergrad, and then my love of history from childhood, all prepared me for teaching African American history. I've taught advanced placement world history, in which I had to immerse myself in the different texts of the world, the different religions of the world, and read those texts. And I know that sometimes it takes a little bit away when you're reading the Quran or you're reading some of the different books of Buddhism and some of the different stories, but you do the best you can with translations. And teaching AP World definitely gives a different perspective of life. Teaching economics really helps you understand. And then teaching advanced placement US history. All of those courses require you to get out of the textbook and go into the documents. And once you start diving into the documents and really just starting to peel back the layers of the onion, it starts to change your views and your perspectives. And it opens your mind to different possibilities. And doing all of those different things really did, and teaching all of those subjects, prepared me for teaching this course as well, and just designing it, honestly. It helped me in the design process.
So more broadly, why history? I mean, you said since you were in school yourself, grade school, when did you develop a love for history?
I remember one of my favorite books was Mildred Taylor's Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry. And that book was all about post-Reconstruction, the sharecropping era. And then I read Let the Circle Be Unbroken. And Mildred Taylor kind of opened my eyes to our story. I then started to ask my mother. And my mother said, okay, well, our family's from Rocky Mount, North Carolina. You've been down there. There are two different sides of the train tracks. How our houses, the way our houses were built. And my mother, told me about the people who were sharecroppers and why their houses looked the way they did. And whereas we owned our land, so our houses looked a very different way. And so she then went into stories about my grandmother and, just all of these different things that I didn't know. And that started my love of history when I was a 14-year-old girl. And I've been looking at our story ever since.
Yeah, I'm always very impressed by folks who are doing that history into their own family tree, whether it be genealogy or just kind of narrative. Just because once it's gone, it's gone. So it's really, really important to make sure that all that stays together. So you developed this love of history in your teenage years. When did you decide you wanted to go into the classroom? I'm sure that's what most teenagers would say they would never want to do.
And that is a funny story. I had by the time I was a senior in high school, I had pretty much done all my coursework. And so, in Montgomery County, you have to have a job in order to do a half-day schedule. And my mother and father were definitely not having that. So they said my focus was school. And so I then became an intern in the office for the end of the day. Pretty much from about 12 to 2, I was an intern in the office. And so being an intern in the office, you kind of are around the principals, you deliver their messages, you do all of these different things. And that was the year that our school was getting the National Blue Ribbon when I was in high school, Paint Branch High School. So we were getting the National Blue Ribbon, and I had to tour the people from the committee. And my principal said, Antoinette, just be yourself. They're going to ask you a million questions and just tell them what we're doing. And so at that point in time, right before then, my principal wanted me to organize a tutoring program for freshmen. And I said, oh, I don't have anything to do. I guess I'll do it. And so when I went and toured, I could talk about this tutoring program that we're offering. And at that moment, once I was doing the tour and I was teaching them what I was teaching the freshmen, I then figured out that, oh, I think I can do this for the rest of my life. Plus, we have a good pension program. So I don't have to worry about retirement.
For job security, it's probably a good thing too.
Yeah. So when I was a senior in high school, that's when I actually said, this is what I want to do. So that's what I've been doing since then.
Gotcha. That's extremely insightful too. I too wanted to be a teacher, but I just it was very pragmatic. It was just like, well, I want to teach kindergarten. I'm a male, so I'm pretty sure I would never want for a job ever. So let me just do that.
Yes.
But so from there, you go to Temple up in Philly, and then you make your way so you were born in North Carolina, if I caught that?
No, I was born in Maryland, but DC, let me rephrase that. I was born in DC, yes. And then from DC, we shifted over to Maryland, as most people do, and then went back to North Carolina every so often, because that's, of course, where my mother is from Rocky Mount. So pretty much that's where, hung out in the summers and things of that nature. Rocky Mount, North Carolina. Not too far from you.
Yeah, no, it's closer to us than other parts of Virginia are to us. So yes. 2 hours from Durham from here probably, or 5 hours, 4 hours from Bristol. Yeah. So from DC, Maryland to Temple, and then to Virginia. So how'd you end up, teaching in Virginia, in Northern Virginia?
That's a funny story. I taught in DC when I first got out of undergrad. I came back home, and DC had a program for teachers. And so, my mother is an accountant, so she was always very practical. And so I lived at home for a year. She said they have this teacher next door program, and you can buy a house in DC if you teach in DC. So I taught in DC for 4 years, got my first little house in the city, which I still do have. It's still there, haven't sold it. But purchased a little house in the city through the Teacher Next Door program. And then the school started shutting down. They started laying teachers off. And I am one, as my mother has always taught me, You need to have a job before they fire you because you have a mortgage. And so I just, started applying to different school districts, and Alexandria called me. And at that point in time, I had no clue, not a clue. I had to Google it. And this is when Google was, kind of like early Google. And TC Williams called me. And I was like, well, let me go do my little background information on TC Williams. And I'm like, oh, wow, this is the TC Williams? That TC Williams?
Yeah.
And TC, I went from teaching 4 years in DC straight to Virginia. So I was in my 5th year teaching when I went to TC. It was absolutely fantastic. They are still my family. I love everyone at TC. I can't rave anymore about Alexandria City Public Schools. They're fantastic. I then shifted over to Arlington, not for any other reason than just some change, a little bit of change. Because like I said, some of my best friends are still teaching at TC, and I love it. And then I just switched over to Arlington for career opportunities. Sometimes you're in one place a little bit too long. I didn't want to leave Virginia just because in my mind, the educational system in Virginia has got it right. It may not be perfect,
right,
but Virginia has it right. Virginia knows that their educators are the heart and soul of their educational system. So they allow the freedom for educators to create. Sure. And that's something that a lot of places don't get. So kids are successful in Virginia because the people who created the assessments are the teachers who are teaching them.
Right.
And they pull teachers from everywhere in the state, and we all meet and exchange information and ideas. And Virginia facilitates this wonderful professional atmosphere for educators. So even though I live in Maryland, I still teach in Virginia. So, that's how I ended up there, because they were, closing schools in DC and haven't left since 17, what's that? 13 years later?
Well, that is a really cool thing to hear. And I won't actually comment on this, but the whole Common Core versus SOL thing, I mean, it kind of adds that argument. Why should we change when we're doing things pretty well for the most part already in Virginia?
Exactly. And that's honestly my mindset is Virginia has it right, and everyone's trying to catch up with Virginia. Or not even that, just look at the model of Virginia. What does Virginia do? They put their educators first. That's it. Right. So,
I'm sure they would love to hear all of this at the Board of Ed or DOE or love everything saying. So another thing that I find cool, all this user experience, and for folks listening, I mean, the school districts in Northern Virginia, I mean, those are some of the best school systems in the country, let alone the state. And so that speaks to the quality of Antoinette, certainly. But what I find really cool is that you were able to design your own course. I'm sure this is something that happened in the beginning, but as you continue on, as you move from TC Williams to there are too many A counties in Nova, so I don't want to say the wrong one, but yeah. Alexandria to Arlington.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about how that came to happen, how you designed your own course, and what happened before that?
So I left Alexandria, where I was teaching AP World. Like, I was the AP World guru. Like, world history was my thing. And I loved being able to learn about different groups of people from different places. And when I traveled and met people, they were always surprised, like, how much I knew about their culture or their history and things of that nature. And so it allowed for me to really bond and make relationships and build relationships. So when I came to Arlington, they said, well, we want you to teach AP US history. So I said, okay. And me being me, I go back to my books and I'm like, wait a minute. when I went to Temple, I kind of did a whole lot in African-American history. You know, they didn't have an African-American history program per se. So you had to kind of like piecemeal all of these different classes together. And so I piecemealed all of these classes. And then I remember like my regular US history books, I sold them back. All I had was African-American history books. And so I was like, cheese and crackers, let me go and start reading the book. I got to go read this. I got to go and, you know, ask some friends. And then I just made a decision that I was going to use just mostly documents, primary source documents, to teach my AP US history course. And then the African American History Museum opened. Because, you know, teaching US history, you're like, okay, I'm going to teach it the way it's supposed to be taught. College Board has our curriculum. I'm just going to do it that way and infuse the primary source documents. But then the museum opened. And when I was in the museum, I remember the day was February 2nd, and they had just opened the inaugural year, and I was like super excited. And I went with my school. We had one of our PTSA president. She did their website, like she was their head web designer. So she got us all tickets. And so we were super excited. And so I went with one of my closest girlfriend's moms. And her mom is 75 years old. So the museum was very different for her. And so when we both descended down the elevator and it opened up and I was like, yes. Yep. Everywhere I turned, I said, yes. I felt validated. Right. There is so much that a lot of people don't know. And it was just there, everything from talking about Quinn and Zinga, to talking about the different tribes, to talking about the gold salt trade, to talking about the Europeans coming and asking to be a part, all of these different things that I knew in my mind. I was like, they're all here, yay! And it was this wonderful moment. But I remember my girlfriend's mom, her perspective was very different because, again, she's older. Right. So her grandparents were enslaved, and they're from Louisiana, and they were part of the group that did get the 40 acres. And so it's a whole different story for them. Right. And so her perspective was very different than my perspective, but it was bringing those two perspectives together that really started me to thinking. And then we got towards the middle. And if you know the museum, I kind of have a tendency to know it like the back of my hand because I've been there too many times, way too many times. But there is an airplane, a red-tail airplane. And there's like this small little exhibit in the corner for the Tuskegee Airmen. And there was this little girl, teenage girl, and her boyfriend standing there. And they were like, well, who are the Tuskegee Airmen? And my heart dropped. I was like, my heart literally sank in my chest. Because my grandfather fought in World War II. My grandfather was on that fourth wave of D-Day when African Americans couldn't fight, but they had to clean up the beaches. My grandpa was there. We had his discharge papers. He was there in France. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? I said, the Tuskegee Airmen visited us when we were in high school. Like, we know these people. You know, we've met them. How do you not know this? And I was just like, what? What's going on? And I felt in my heart with one of my best friend's moms here, and she's like bawling, like, this brings up so much. The cabin, she remembers her grandmother's cabin, and it was just so much for her. And then this little girl in this next generation who had no clue. I then asked my head of department, she was there, we were eating lunch in the cafeteria. I said, how do you create a course? And she said, well, all you have to do is this. I said, okay, I'm gonna talk to the head of social studies for Arlington. And literally, she said, this is what you need to do. I said, okay. And so I wrote up a proposal. I wrote up like a sketch of what I wanted it to look like. I then dug deep and searched the crevices and cracks and crevices of the VDOE course codes. And they have a course code called African Studies. I said, oh, well, let me pull this little course code that's already in there. And from there, I just started writing, and my school board, we didn't even know they approved the course. Like, I had no clue. It came up on the kids' course offerings the following year. I didn't know. I didn't get a letter. I didn't get anything. I submitted my documents to have a course added to the, program of studies. I, sketched it out. The next thing I knew was that kids were saying they were going to take it. And I was like, wait a minute, huh? And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, well, I have to actually finish writing it. Oh my gosh, I've got like, how many months? 7 months? Oh! And so then that's how it all happened. And last year was the first year of the course. You came and visited my children, and they're all doing really well. Two students are actually appealing for my course to give them 3 credits in college because they want a minor in African American Studies. So University of Pittsburgh is going to waive the intro to African American history because of this student taking my course. So she gets 3 credits for me, and so that makes me feel kind of validated.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about that. So that's something big for me to, it's not about high school, that they can actually get 3 college credits for a course that I created. So it really, really helps, has a lot of perspective.
Remember, like I've heard all that rings extremely true. Like it will rave about the course. And I can just, like I said earlier, like I can tell just by looking at the book show, I'm like, yeah, she knows what's going on.
And the reason why I call it, people always ask me, why is it not history versus studies? And so I've been going back and forth with the name. The reason why I had done studies versus history was because I kind of pull in, especially during the beginning, economics, the economy. Right. And so that economics piece helps to put context to the historical piece. Absolutely. And then there's this social structure. Once you move a little bit further in our story, it's a social structure. So it's that social stratification. But then there's also the still economics piece in there as well. So it's kind of all bridging it together in order to understand, I call it our story of America. Right. You have to be able to put it all together to really get a cohesive picture, especially for children.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's what I appreciate about, I finally went to Namak like 6 months ago, first time. Of course, overwhelming, but I appreciated how in the bottom part when you start, it is very much through, of course, people are going to take, triangle trading, but it is really economic focus because that was really a big driving factor. I think that you can't, like you said, you can't talk about the system of enslavement without talking about supply and demand. Like you have to talk about from economic lens. And I appreciate the way you talk about that, and yeah, everything, the way you frame your course. I would love to take it if I was able.
I would love to teach it, but it's amazing. I would love it to teach it to adults. Maybe I think that's my next. Maybe that's my next place. Moonlight.
Any thoughts on getting a terminal degree, PhD, Dr. Waters?
Yes, that is actually next on the plate. Did not want to do that, but oh man, I'll be doing that. University of Maryland. I'll be going to Maryland. So it's not something that I wanted to do. It was kind of like advised from my friends who are in the professor's circle who have definitely, like Dr. Aldridge is like so supportive, and I look at him like a mentor. He is so amazing, but he's one of those people who's like, Antoinette, you got to do it. You have this gift, so this is what I need you to do. He's one of those people who calls me and says, Antoinette, this is what I need you to do.
That was just something I was hoping to speak into existence, but I'm a little late, so I'm glad that that's already.
and trust me, I don't want to do it. I don't want to. I don't want to go back to school again.
Oh, man. But there's a calling, I'm sure, that you feel drawn to it, and just kind of every step it just seems like there's another thing, and this is probably that next thing. And once you check this box, there really are other boxes.
I know. It really is about checking another box. I think, yeah, you're right. That's exactly what it is. So.
I think along the same lines. Like, I am finishing my master's in May. It's been drastically changed because of COVID-19, of course. But I'm just like, look, I'm done. May 15th, whether I'm walking across the stage or not, like, I'm not coming back. So.
Oh, you're done. And they probably sent you your paperwork like, we're so sorry that you can't have a graduation, but here's your diploma. It'll be in the mail in 2 weeks.
Like, hey, save me my money on that cap and gown, and I'm throwing a party or anything like that.
Thank you. Just mail it. All I need is for it to come in the mail. Thanks.
Well, you've answered probably most of my questions, but I do want to ask one more before I just kind of open it up. Are there, and I think I kind of know how to answer, but I still want to ask, just, are there topics within the way, maybe the way that U.S. history is traditionally taught that still do not get talked about in a authentic, appropriate, or full way? Are there topics maybe that stand out that to you that don't get the attention or the depth that they probably should be in order to understand kind of fuller American U.S. history, if that makes sense? I know my question's kind of weird suddenly.
No. Humanity, the humanity of it all. Sometimes it's taught with this idea of American exceptionalism. This city upon a hill. It was so beautiful. This is how it just appeared out of nowhere. And that's not the truth. And my biggest issue that I have with some people in the way that they teach it is they don't teach our full story. I sometimes try to help people understand that African Americans aren't given anything, really. We fight for every single thing. And a lot of people don't understand and don't put it into the context that there have been barriers that we have just gone straight through. And it's a matter of respecting the fact that in spite of all of this, look at how great we are. It's not a woe, and that's my issue. People sometimes teach it as a woe is me story when that's not the story. The story is how amazing this person is. So I think that that's something that's not taught. Here's a sidebar. Oh, these African Americans were here. This is what happened. No, you can't do that. You have to teach it in its full capacity of it all. And that's really what I think is missing. The connections, the whys. When you teach our story, not his story, but our story, the best way possible, children will walk away with a real understanding of who we are as Americans, and they're also able to solve some of the problems. They can get rid of a lot of issues if we just, come out and say, here is what it is. Here is how it happened. Everything, let's just put it out on the table. And I mean gradually, because young children can't handle certain things, but gradually, if we start pulling back the veil, and pulling back that mask, I think a lot of people will, have a different perspective, because you don't understand how heartbroken people are. The emails I get from people who are like in their 60s. I had a colleague of mine send me an email feeling horrible about himself. He says, "Oh, Mrs. Waters, I just want you to know I visited the Library of Congress, and I didn't know Rosa Parks did that on purpose." I said, "Did what on purpose?" She sat down on the bus. I said, what? You didn't know that? I said, she wasn't the first person.
Right.
Did you know there was a little girl who did it before? Really? You didn't know? And I can't say that to him, but the fact of the matter is that he then started to go back to his books, and he has a degree from one of the top universities in the United States. And he felt really betrayed because he said, this wasn't taught to me. And so he and I conversed, and I gave him a couple of books, and here are some things to help you understand, to ease you in, because he felt betrayed.
Right.
And which is what a lot of people feel. They feel betrayed that no one told them the truth.
Right.
They feel very betrayed. And they feel betrayed that they spent all of this money on this degree. And he has a degree in history. And he says, I can't believe that I don't know this story. And I spent all of this money on this fancy degree from this fancy university, and they didn't even teach me this. And so that's what's missing. Our full story, not the rose-colored glasses. You know, I think in Virginia, we're one of those places where we're starting to kind of, you know, and maybe I'm the proponent of pushing it, taking Thomas Jefferson off of the pedestal, you know, we know the story. Virginians now.
Right.
You know, but that's still a fight in Virginia, you know. Thomas Jefferson, like a question mark.
You're right.
But a lot of people feel betrayed after they find out the truth. And I think that if we start teaching our children from a young age, we just take it off little by little, you know, little by little, not all at once, because it's a tough story, right. But little by little, because once they're in high school, they're ready to start. But if you don't do it until they're an adult,
right.
They can be angry, which a lot of people are.
Yep. No, I appreciate every word of that answer. Your truth and a lot of people's truths. Certainly, I think a lot of that's a philosophy we have here at Moton. And I think our big thing, we present the history in an objective way, and you will leave the exhibit. You can formulate your own opinions. But it's our goal to not demonize, but also not deify any of these people who were a part of this. They were people, and people are imperfect. And make imperfect decisions, and those imperfect decisions have consequences. Some are good, some are really not good. Here's the motivation behind it, you know, yada yada yada, you know. So that that was an awesome, that was a better answer than I should have said myself or anticipated, and I appreciate that. Anything else that you want to share, just that we haven't had a chance to cover, or anything else about history or background, anything you want to share?
No, people can expect a book out maybe in fall of, 2021. I will be, by the pushing of Dr. Aldridge, writing a book on how to teach African-American history. That's my goal, to have it out by next fall. And it's just for teachers. It's a teacher's book. It's a book for teachers. And it is how to teach it at different levels and how to integrate it within your current curriculum. Sometimes I think people want to separate African-American history from American history when it's all one story. It's not a separate story. It is our full story of America, and that is something that most people don't understand. But once you really put those stories, if you put it all together, it becomes a whole. That's it. Right. Separate, no one understands it. All together, it then really opens your mind to the possibility of greatness. So it'll be hopefully out fall of 2021.
Well, I should have talked to you more before this, because that was a whole slew of questions to ask about that. But I'll say we'll have to get you to come to Farmville, hopefully, if you're willing to do, book signing. And I think
of course, yes, Kanan, you're a part of my first group of people who actually supported me. You don't understand. I'm so thankful for everyone. Just so thankful for your support, for everyone's just welcoming support of this work. It was difficult, I think, for a lot of people to accept. But once we started to really like say, this is our full story and let's not be ashamed of it, it's exciting. So thank you so much for all of your support.
Thank you for everything you do. And we want to elevate people like yourself who are doing this work. I do have another question. I know you're writing a book. When do you have time to sleep? Like, you are teaching and, and I know you have a family. Like what is this is kind of a rant, but what is your self-care? What do you do for self-care?
Read. My problem is my self-care is like reading. And so that's what my problem is. When do I do it? Honestly, the worst time. I am a person who gets light bulbs at 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. So at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up and I start to write. I may not stop until 5:45, 6 a.m., in which I have to physically stop myself. So at first it was the curriculum, and I said, let me get this 100% done. Dr. Aldridge called me one day and was like, Antoinette, you need to write a book. I think it may have been like in January or February. He called and it was like, I think after one of your meetings. And he was like, here's what you have to do. And so, he's so wonderful and so supportive. And so I said, okay, well, let me finish the curriculum. And then God gave us a pandemic.
Right.
And, sometimes God is telling you to be still and do what I told you to do. You always make excuses how you don't have any time. And now I've given it to you, Antoinette. So,
right.
Besides teaching online, here is what you're going to do as well.
Right.
So, my 3-year-old, I have a girlfriend who lives really close and our sons are really close. And so she works from home. And so we know neither one of us are going anywhere else. And my husband actually he's essential. So he has to go into work. But he doesn't see anyone or anything. He's behind the IT guy to make sure all of this stays in existence. But so she comes and we alternate. Both of us have work to do. We alternate just overseeing and making sure they don't kill each other.
Right.
So this is how I found the time to write the book, was during a pandemic.
We have to find something good in the sea of bad. The objective of these is not to talk about myself. I'll share something I've been doing. I'm going to learn how to video edit. So I'm going to edit this myself once we're done, learn how to video and audio edit. That's kind of my project right now, having all this free time.
Awesome.
Transferable skills.
Exactly.
So, Antoinette, thank you so much for joining us here today. If people want to learn more about your work or social media, any of that stuff you'd like to share, social media information, or any way people can follow you?
So I am on Twitter, Antoinette ED. That's it, Antoinette Ed. So it's pretty easy. If anyone wants to check out the Huffington Post article, please do it. You can just Google me, Antoinette Dempsey Waters. I put my maiden name in there because, some people know me by my maiden name. So they can look me up, Antoinette Dempsey Waters. Send me an email at any time, antoinette.waters@apsva.us for any questions, concerns that they have about teaching the course. I have no problem helping to mentor young teachers who are trying to get into this the first time, because it can be really scary to teach the truth, and how much should you teach and what should you teach, which is another reason why I'm writing the book. What's appropriate.
I'll say get it while you can get it for free, because any free services will not be lasting very much longer. Well, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to the time when things are normal again and I can hopefully come back and visit your class again, or vice versa, and come down the road.
Yes, I'm excited. I can't wait till it's all normal or our new normal.
New normal, yeah. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and you take care.
All right, thank you too. Thank you, Kanan. Bye.